Okay, welcome to the Connecticut VW Diesel Emissions Mitigation Program webinar. I'm going to go over a few notes before we start the webinar. Due to the amount of people attending, everyone will be muted as they enter the room. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them in the chat window. We record the questions as they come in and try to answer as many as possible by the end of the presentation. To enter the chat, if you're on a desktop, just click the chat button at the bottom of the screen. If you're on a mobile device, select the participants button at the bottom of the screen, then click the chat button at the bottom of the next screen. Please limit your questions to questions about the grant program specifically. If you have questions about your specific project or equipment, please email them to us. You can use the link at our VW website, or the email address will be displayed later during this presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the VW website next week. The slides will be available on the VW website by tomorrow. Also, if you have any problems hearing us, please type that into the chat room and we'll try to alleviate the problem. With that, I'll hand it over to Lakeisha Christopher.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you for participating in our webinar today. We wanted to take the opportunity to give you some information about the program, just a brief overview of what brought us to this point, as well as the application process and a question and answer section at the end of the presentation. So start off, we wanted to talk about who will be involved with the diesel mitigation program, diesel emissions mitigation program. And primarily the mobile sources group will be the group evaluating applications that come in for projects on this program. And the mobile sources group is made up of Jen Riley, Lou Corsino, Patrice Kelly, Paul Kritzler, and Sharon Gustav. They're going to be the first people to put hands on your applications pretty much and take it through the evaluation process. I'm the supervisor of the mobile source group, and I will do the first sort of supervisory review of those applications, and Paul Farrell will do a final review for the Air Bureau. Essentially, the final approval rests with the commissioner of the department. Like I mentioned before, the agenda for today is just a brief background on the VW settlement, and then we'll go through what the program parameters are for the mitigation program, as well as the types of projects that are funded and the levels at which they are funded. Then Patrice Kelly will go over the application process, and she'll walk you through the forms, what we'll be doing on our end to process those applications, and what happens after an award determination is made and the project has to be implemented. Then there'll be some information as to how you can get in touch with us if you have additional questions beyond today, and also the opportunity to review some questions we've already gotten and responded to through our emails, as well as any questions that come up at the end of this presentation. So many of you might know the overview that I'm going to give you now. Essentially, back in 2008, EPA developed diesel emission standards or made them stronger from what was existing at the time. And shortly after that, VW started installing defeat devices on their diesel vehicles to ensure that while those vehicles are being tested, they would show that they meet the performance standards. In about 2014, an independent researcher did some tests on a 2012 Jetta TDI and found out that the emissions while the vehicle was in use were significantly higher than what it showed when it was being tested. Following that, those results, VW acknowledged that they had in fact installed these defeat devices on more than 11 million vehicles globally, 12,000 of which were in Connecticut. As a result of that admission, there was a court case between the District Court of California, Volkswagen, and EPA, and several consent decrees were the result of that court case. And essentially, what was decided, EPA had to pay a settlement for the excess NOx emissions that these 590,000 vehicles had put out across the US. The settlement was in total $2.9 billion for the mitigation trust. The trust is in existence for 10 years from the date it was finalized. Of that $2.9 billion, $55.7 million is allocated to Connecticut. Each state got their own allocation, and if for any reason any other state have not used their funds within that 10-year period, Connecticut's allocation can be increased based on what is still left in the pot at that time. But we all have a 10-year period over which we can disseminate the funds through competitive solicitation. The trust is administered by Wilmington Trust. It's they essentially are the ones who will distribute funds for projects completed on the state programs. To access this funds, Connecticut had to become a beneficiary of the trust. And in January of this year, Connecticut was certified by Wilmington Trust to be a beneficiary under the program. I'm sorry, a beneficiary of the trust. Following that, in April of this year, we submitted our final mitigation plan to Wilmington Trust, and we launched this emission mitigation program on May 30th. Now, the mitigation plan that was finalized and submitted to Wilmington Trust back in April had actually gone through a detailed process or public process for input from stakeholders. We had an initial draft back in February of 2017. At that time, we held a public comment on the draft and received a public comment period on the draft, and we received several comments on that informal draft. We then had a second draft released in February of this year, and there was an additional comment period on that draft, and the comments received on both informed the final mitigation plan that was actually submitted to Wilmington Trust on April 26th. That plan is available on the VW page, www.ct.gov/D/VW. Essentially, we left our mitigation plan open to cover all the eligible categories that were covered in Appendix D2 of the trust. We thought leaving it open allowed flexibility to ensure a wide array of projects could be submitted and funded. We were looking to see immediate NOx reductions from these projects, so we wanted projects that could be implemented in a short time period. We also wanted to ensure that the plan was open and broad enough to allow for the advancement of transformative mobile source technologies. So as transportation technologies advance, the mitigation plan is able to accommodate those advancements. We also have a cost share for all applicants in the plan to ensure that the funding could essentially stretch to accommodate more projects than we would have been able to accommodate without a cost share. So what does the plan cover? Like I said, essentially every eligible category in D2 is included in our mitigation plan. So 70% of the funding that we've been allocated will go for all those categories: on-road heavy-duty vehicles, non-road equipment, commercial marine vessels, locomotives, and also the DARE option. There is a 15%. The trust allowed for a maximum of 15% to be allocated to EVSE, electric vehicle infrastructure equipment. Our mitigation plan has allotted that 15% to that type of project. We have, however, not put out a solicitation at this time for EVSE projects. And there's also the 15% that's allowed under the trust for administrative expenditures. So what is our program? So for the first round of the program, we have made available $7.5 million for project funding. The solicitation period opened on May 30th and it closes on July 31st at 5 p.m. The program is open to both government and non-government entities, and for the purposes of this program, private bus companies with a contract with any public school system in Connecticut is considered a government entity. As I mentioned before, the categories covered are on-road heavy-duty trucks and buses, airport ground support equipment, forklifts, port cargo handling equipment, commercial marine vessels, shore power for ongoing vessels, for ocean-going vessels, and freight switchers. Not eligible at this time is EV charging infrastructure projects. We are currently in the process of creating an EV roadmap for the state of Connecticut, and we would like the result of that roadmap to inform the solicitation process for EV infrastructure. So we're going to be holding off on putting that out until we have finalized that roadmap, which we're hoping to finalize before the end of this year. So there is a possibility that solicitation for these projects could come as early as 2019. The program is a reimbursement program. Essentially, anyone applying to the program will have to fund their project upfront and submit the required paperwork to get reimbursed for the covered portion of their project. Any project that is initiated prior to filing an application for the program is not going to be eligible for funding. So if you're thinking of applying for funding under this program, please hold off on making any sort of contracts or agreements until you've submitted your application. Projects and final paperwork under the program has to be completed and submitted to us by March 31st, 2020. I suggest that when you're thinking about completing your project, try to complete it shortly before March 31st, because what happens if you wait until March 31st, then you're sort of scrambling to get your paperwork in, and that ends up not coming in on time. So I would keep March 31st as the deadline for submittal of your final paperwork. So it may be beneficial, if possible, to have the project completed just slightly before that date. Funding for the program is going to be awarded on an open, competitive, and transparent process. Each application will be evaluated on the merit of the application, as well as the NOx benefit that can be realized for the state from that project being completed, and the other funding priorities that have been outlined in the mitigation plan. All the documentation that comes in under this program, unless deemed confidential, will be made publicly available. So the eligible projects that will be funded under this program. Any Class 4 to Class 8 local freight truck, port drayage trucks, or Class 4 to Class 8 school, shuttle, and transit buses are covered under the program. The trucks with an engine model year between 1992 and 2009, and buses with an engine model year in 2009 or older are covered. If a government entity submits an application for any of those projects, they can be reimbursed up to 65% for a repower or replacement with a new diesel or alternate fuel vehicle or an all-electric engine or vehicle. In the cases of all-electric replacement or repower, the associated infrastructure for charging is an included cost or a cost that is covered under the program. For non-government projects, an applicant can get up to 40% to repower with a new diesel or alternate fuel engine, up to 25% to replace a new diesel or with a new diesel or alternate fuel vehicle. Except in the case of a drayage truck, that reimbursement amount goes up to 50%. For repower or replacement with a new all-electric engine, again, also with the associated infrastructure, non-government entities are eligible for up to 60% of the cost of the project. For non-road equipment, airport ground support equipment, forklifts, and port cargo handling equipment are eligible for coverage under the program. For ground support equipment, any tier 0 to 2 spark ignition engines or uncertified or a certified engine that has been certified up to 3 grams per brake horsepower hour of emissions are covered under the program. Forklifts such as reach stackers, side loaders, top loaders with a lift capacity of 8,000 pounds or greater are also covered. And port cargo handling equipment such as rubber-tired gantry cranes, straddle carriers, shuttle carriers, and terminal tractors are covered under the program, as well as yard hostlers and yard tractors that can operate within ports. The reimbursements amount for these types of projects, again, for government entities, you can be reimbursed up to 65% to repower or replace with a new all-electric engine. Only electric replacements are eligible under this category. For non-government entities, you're eligible for up to 60% for repower or replacement, again with all-electric engines or vehicle. For commercial marine vessels, which include ferries and tugs, as well as shore power for ocean-going vessels, those are covered. Ferries and tugs are covered if they're unregulated or a tier 1 or tier 2 marine engine operating at least 1,000 hours per year. Shore power, which would include components of a shoreside system that allows a compatible vessel's main and auxiliary engines to remain off while the vessel is at berth, that will be covered. So essentially, installing some sort of power distribution to power the ocean-going vessel while it's at dock will be covered. And the reimbursement for those would be up to 65% in the case of ferries and tugs to repower with a new diesel or alternate fuel engine or a new all-electric engine. In the case of shore power, you could get up to 65% to cover the cost that would be associated with installing that shoreside system. If you're a non-government entity, you can get up to 40% to repower with a diesel or alternate fuel engine, and up to 60% to repower with an all-electric engine. For shore power, you could get 25% of the cost involved with installing that shoreside system reimbursed. Freight switchers are also an eligible piece of equipment under the program. Any freight switcher locomotive that is pre-Tier 4 and operates at least 1,000 hours per year is eligible for replacement or repowering. And the replacement and repowering reimbursement amounts for that is up to 65% if you're a government entity. And if you are not, it is up to 40% if you're repowering with a new diesel or alternate fuel engine, up to 25% if you're replacing with a new diesel or alternate fuel switcher, or 60% if you're repowering or replacing with an all-electric engine. So that's essentially what's covered. And Pat is going to go through what the process is for applying under the program.
Okay, hello, I'm Patrice Kelly. If you're interested in getting an application form, you go to our web page, which has already been mentioned, www.ct.gov/deep/VW. Not only can you find the form there, but we worked very hard on putting together a resource document to try to get you step by step through the form. If you have any questions at the end of this process, at the end of the webinar today, you may find some of the answers in the guidance document. The forms are electronically fillable if you wish, but they have to be printed and signed and sent by mail to the Central Permit Processing Unit. And all applicants will receive an initial notice of receipt by email. So this is the beginning of the application form. Applicant information, the important things we need to get out of this, other than the basic contact information, is we need to know who your the person with the authority to sign off is. We need to know their name and their title. However, if that person doesn't want to receive emails from us and phone calls, they can delegate someone else as a backup for the day-to-day responses. Sometimes, for instance, a DPW supervisor will delegate to the fleet manager to run this. Sometimes our primary contact is a sustainability coordinator who isn't even a paid member of the staff. So you can have one person here or you can have several, but we need to know who's going to be signing the documents and we need to know who we can contact on a day-to-day basis. This is also where you enter whether you're a government government entity or a private entity, and we've already talked about the difference. And I'll mention again that a private bus company under contract to provide private public school transportation is eligible to apply as a government entity. Tell us about your project. If your proposal includes more than one of the numbered headings, you have number 1 and 2 you can see on this, you need a separate form for each one. If you have a whole group of replacement and repower projects under item 1, you can put them all on one proposal. Notice that under the heading, there are bullets that indicate attachments, materials that you have to submit with your proposal for each category. After you've selected one category and reviewed the materials that you're going to have to submit with it, at the very end, you get to give us a description of your project. Now, this is an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about your project than just the basics. Be sure to include air quality benefits. For instance, if you're upgrading a recycling truck, a heavy-duty recycling truck, to a larger capacity recycling truck, that truck can make a longer run and fewer trips between the pickup points and the drop-up points. That decreases the miles traveled. That's a benefit. That's an air quality benefit that you can mention in your project summary. Otherwise, we want to know how many trucks, how many buses, whatever you're planning to do with them, the number of new ones, and the models, what you can tell us about the models. Proposed budget. This sheet is for the new trucks. This is the place you put the information on the new vehicles, the new engines, the new buses. You don't put old ones here. There's another place for them. This is for the new equipment. We have room to put 3 different groups. So if you're replacing, say, 5 full-size school buses, 3 short school buses, and the engine in your favorite dump truck, you can put all 3 of those on this form, and you could add on, if they're all replacement, you can add them on. The bottom part of this is for the electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which you can add on if you're replacing a diesel vehicle with an electric vehicle. Be sure to attach all the estimates and spec sheets that you get in preparing this form. This is a separate one that gives you an idea of what the shore power part looks like. We have separate ones for marines and locomotives too. Shore power is a little bit different. It looks like an EV charging station. You have lots of information that we want to know about the labor and the materials needed to prepare the site, to install the unit, and to get the unit operational. You should be prepared, if you haven't done this before, to know that the site preparation installation costs are often greater than the cost of the equipment itself. We expect that, we understand that. Again, be sure you have all the estimates and spec sheets attached. I think I skipped one. Then we'd like to know where your funds are coming from, your share of the funds. If it's a capital account and it's available now, you can put that in. If it's a municipal budget and you have to wait till the next budget before the funds become available, we understand that too. That's the purpose of this table. The next page, this will become the heart of your management plan for your project. We'd like to get as much information as we can from you at the beginning so that we're ready to hit the ground running when the proposals are accepted and we begin to move. It has an outline of the deliverables and tasks we would be expecting. These will be customized eventually, but this is a basic overview. It has a list of the dates you expect to get your proposals out, to get your equipment, the date where you expect to receive your equipment, the date you expect to have the old equipment scrapped. All of that information, as well as you can predict, should go on here. When you're picking dates, please be conservative. We anticipate that because of all this VW money, the manufacturers may not be able to deliver as promptly as you would expect. There may be delays that you don't expect. So be conservative when you're setting out the delivery dates. I want to point out the fourth row down. We've had a couple questions about this. You can see that's the only place where you enter an amount of money for the VW funds. That's where you put what you expect us to give you. And please assume that you're going to get everything you ask. That may not happen, but assume that. The box to the right of that is going to be where you subtract that amount from the payments that you've already made. As Keisha pointed out, this is a reimbursement program. So by this point, you will already have paid for your project. Here is where you subtract the amount that we're giving you, so that down here you will have your cost share. If you have a positive number here and the same positive number here, this is going to be a zero. Probably we should have just automatically entered a zero, but this is what will go there. So take a look at all those requirements. They're not terrible, but this is what we will expect you to do. Now down here under reporting, you notice we're not going to pay you anything for reporting. The reports are not 50-page documents. They're an email that we will send you saying, how are things going? Are you on schedule? Are you having any issues that we can help you resolve? You can respond in an email within 5 minutes, and that's all we will really need from you. But we do have we will have due dates for the semi-annual reporting. Then we have the criteria, the preferential criteria. These are your extra credit points. These are not requirements, but this is where you get a chance to show off all the wonderful benefits of your project. For every box you can check, you have room to tell us about it and tell us how you justify it. So if you check this box, you can tell us about it. And these cells will expand. If you check this box, you can tell us about it. This is an opportunity to promote your project, and you can check every box that applies. Now, the first two criteria are the most important ones because they're the only ones that are specifically listed in the VW settlement materials. So the VW is interested in NOx reductions, and VW is interested in seeing projects located in areas that have borne a disproportionate share of the adverse impacts of air pollution. If you do your own calculations of the NOx benefits, please let us know the system that you used and be prepared to submit an electric file showing the inputs and results if we request it. For continuity's sake, among all the proposals, we will cross-check them using the diesel emission quantifier from EPA. For any of the criteria that mention a location, we're not talking about your headquarters, we're talking about where the vehicles operate. Transformative projects that promote other statewide energy, environmental, and economic goals. It's much easier to say what a transformative project is not than what it is, because it's sort of like the legal adage, you'll know it when you see it. A transformative project is one that has sufficient size, scope, or importance to initiate momentum for sustainability and expansion beyond the scope of this program. Replacing a box truck is not transformative. Converting a bus fleet slowly to an electric or alternative fuel fleet could be regarded as transformative. Projects located in non-attainment areas, they help us to meet our EPA requirements, and we're looking forward to seeing some of those. Applicants with demonstrated experience, we always like to see people who've successfully completed projects. Projects with verified or leveraged cost share exceeding the minimum requirements. If we're offering 65% and you can come in with a match of 50%, saving us 15%, that increases the cost effectiveness of your project. So that's a good thing. If you can come in with more than the minimum on your share, that's good. Projects that can be implemented in less than 18 months before March 31st, 2020. We would like to see that because that means we can free up administrative support for other projects. Now, we're not talking about submitting all your paperwork on March 1st and counting that as on March 1st, 2020, and counting that as early, because sometimes it takes as much as a month to get all the paperwork in order. We're talking about something that's completed maybe, well, at least several months earlier than that. We won't say how much, but a project that's completed sometime in March of 2020. It's not an early completion. We're also looking for anti-idling. This is something that Connecticut, the state of Connecticut and the DEEP have tried to promote in any of our projects. If you have a program in place where you contact your drivers and say, please minimize your idling. If you have signs up, say in a schoolyard, to say, please idle as little as possible or shut off when you don't have to be running. All of these will indicate that you have an anti-idling education in place. So we would like to hear about that, and that will count. Terms and conditions. This is the last page of the formal part of the application. This is where that person with the signature authority that we had in the first table has to sign. We want to be sure you sign it before you send it in with the title and the date. It reviews the things that, the elements of the program. And it also, the statement says that if you have not told the truth on the form, we can take back the money. Submit the application to the address specified by mail, U.S. Post. Don't send it to the Air Bureau, don't email it. And then at the very end of the package, we have the material for the old engines. The old vehicles, the old engines go here. Nothing new in this table. We have one line for each vehicle or engine you plan to replace. So you complete it all the way to the end. The one that may give you some challenges is the idling time, the annual hours of idling time. Now your bus drivers and your refuse collectors probably know how much time they stop between runs. Your maintenance truck driver probably doesn't. If you are making an estimate, put a number in and write EST beside it so we know it's an estimate. If you have no clue, you might go to the DEQ, the Diesel Emission Quantifier. EPA has default values. For instance, one that you might not come up with immediately, if you have a short haul single unit truck, and this is like a dump truck or a box truck, EPA's default is 30 hours per year. Transit buses, by contrast, are 340 hours per year. So that's another source for that kind of information. So you send in your application, what happens to it? You will receive a notice that we have gotten your application. If you don't get a notice in a day or two, contact us. We'll try to find out what happened. But you should receive one pretty quickly. Of course, you allow for the U.S. Post. So within 14 days, we should be reviewing each application to be sure it's complete. If there are blank spaces, if there are missing documents, you will be contacted by email. You will have 14 days to respond to that email and turn in the material. If you don't respond to that email, you will get a formal letter requesting the information, and you will have 14 more days to get the material in. If we don't hear from you after 28 days, we deny your application. If the application is complete, it goes on for a technical review and ranking. Now, every so often when we're going to the technical review, we find out we need some more information. Sometimes we need some more details on your criteria discussion or your summary, or the summary of your project. We had one project which they did the estimate of the idling hours, and the number of hours they put in the box was more than the number of hours there are in a year. Of course, that was a typographical error, but we couldn't make that assumption, so we sent it back for a correction. So that would be another type of thing that might go back to you. You would have 14 days to correct it or submit the material. If we didn't get a response to the email, again, you'd get a letter. If we didn't get a response within 14 days with the material we needed, that application would be denied. For everything that's complete and we're able to rank it, we'll do the ranking, and then after, we hope, 60 days, of course, the more of these we have, the longer that's apt to take. But we're aiming for 60 days to notify applicants of the award decisions. It's possible that the award amount may be less than originally requested, based on the number of applications received and the funds available. If you absolutely cannot work with less than what you asked for, and you receive a grant, you have the right to deny the award, and we'll give the funds to someone else. The projects and final documentation must be completed by March 31st, 2020 to be eligible for reimbursement. A reimbursement request template will be made available as the projects get close to winding down, so that you will know all the materials that you'll be needing. And we'll probably be notifying you a little bit ahead of that so that you don't lose anything in the process. Once all the documentation is received and the requirements met, DEEP will request the money from the trustee, who will transfer the money directly to you. Awardee responsibilities. You're required to demonstrate that you made payment for the project before you receive the awarded funds. Any vehicle or engine that's replaced must be rendered inoperable. For an engine, that means cutting a 3-inch hole in the engine block. For a vehicle, that means also disabling the chassis by cutting the vehicle's frame. Doesn't mean you can't sell the disabled vehicle for scrap, but you have to disable it completely. The new equipment must be kept in operation in Connecticut for a minimum of 3 years or replaced with equal or better equipment. If your EV infrastructure that's installed with an electric replacement is publicly accessible, you will have to comply with the Connecticut General Statutes. The citation is in the proposal form. This essentially means registering the unit and paying a small annual fee. For future grant programs, this is only $7.5 million, folks. We got a lot more to give. So if you don't make it on the first round, hold on to your paperwork, because you'll get another chance. If you want to be sure to get the information as soon as possible, go to our website and sign up for the VW email distribution list, and you will get the material on the first day that we announce it. The grant programs for the EV charging station will be coming in the future as we wait for the EV roadmap, as Keisha said. If you have an absolutely wonderful diesel emission project and it does not fit with the eligibility criteria for the VW program, please consider the opportunities under the Diesel Emission Reduction Act. This is funding from EPA, and we are allowed to augment it with funding from VW without changing the much broader set of options that are available. So that program will probably be launched in October, just after we announce the awards for this VW program.
Okay, so my name's Lou Corsino from Connecticut DEEP. Some of you may have contacted me previously through email. I'm going to go over some ways you can contact us. First, if you have an active application, once you submit it to us and it's deemed administratively sufficient, you'll get an email from us indicating who the contact person is for your specific application. So during the application process, please contact that specific person in regards to your application. Anything else, any general questions about the program or our mitigation plan or the settlement or anything like that can be submitted through the website. Click on the Contact Us link. You see the website there, ct.gov/deep/VW, and or directly to the email address, and we'll try to answer your questions as soon as possible. Also, if you have any specific project or equipment questions, please submit them by email. I'm going to go over some common questions we received over the last couple of weeks. Hopefully this helps out some of you. People asked how soon after the July 31st deadline do we anticipate decisions to be made? Our goal is to announce them within 60 days after that deadline. Is this a competitive grant program, and will proposals that reduce more emissions be favored over others? Yes, this is a competitive grant program, and NOx emissions are one part of the criteria that applicants will be ranked against. You can see the application form for the complete list of preferential criteria, and we went over it earlier in this presentation. We've also been asked if there is a target for dollar per ton NOx reduction that we're looking for prioritizing awards. Right now, we are not specifying targets for this. Any projects that scale to achieve the greatest NOx reduction per dollar invested are one criteria that will be used to prioritize awards. Will all award decisions be for the maximum requested or partial awards be made? This was addressed slightly before. We may issue partial awards. The maximum reimbursement amounts are not guaranteed, and all qualified applications are guaranteed, and not all qualified applications are guaranteed to be awarded funding. Once selected for an award, you have the option to accept or deny that award if it does not meet your project requirements. We got a couple questions from tribes asking that they were already a direct beneficiary with a trustee and were already receiving funds or may not be receiving funds under the VW settlement, and we're wondering if they could apply for this program. Yes, they can. We'll be treating their request like any other request for funding under this program. Some questions from municipalities. They were wondering if a vehicle budgeted in a approved 2018-19 budget is eligible for funding under this program. That answer is no. Projects initiated prior to filing an application for the program are not eligible for funding, and this includes projects already in an approved budget. The next question was, how can they take advantage of this program if they already budgeted for 2018-19? This program luckily has been designed with an 18-month window for completing the funded budget. So a town could apply for this grant program for a project not yet in their budget. And if awarded, they could budget for it in their next budget cycle in mid-2019. They would then have until March 2020 to complete the project. The next question, if a municipality successfully applies for a grant and is not able to budget for the project, would they be breaching a contract? We understand that resources and budgetary priorities can fluctuate, and we will consider requests to withdraw from the program. We do ask that notification be sent to DEEP as soon as possible so the funds can be made available to other applicants within a time frame sufficient to complete the projects. And will there be a limit on the amount of funding granted for any eligible project or any one individual entity? There are no limits on the amount of funding for any one project or any individual entity can receive. We're now going to take some general questions. If you have any general questions about the program, please type them in the chat window. We've received a few here. If they're specific to a project or a piece of equipment, please email the question to deep.mobilesources@ct.gov, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Also, our online FAQ has been updated periodically to address some of the questions that have come in, so please take a look at that, and maybe your question has been previously answered. Let's see, we have questions. First question I got is, how will funds be used to support communities disproportionately impacted by high levels of air pollution? And are any funds from the settlement being used to support efforts to decrease the burden of asthma?
So we will be using a ranking system to evaluate the applications received. Communities disproportionately impacted by high levels of pollution is one of the funding priorities in the mitigation plan and will be one of the criteria items prioritized when deciding which projects are awarded. We believe that ensuring that projects in EJ communities are prioritized will go a long way towards reducing emissions in those communities. But at this time, we have not allocated any funds specifically to decrease the burden of asthma.
Next question is the cost of modifications to existing electrical switchgear in a facility, such as transformers, breaker panels, wiring, etc., needed to accommodate EV charging equipment eligible for the 65% reimbursement?
Yes, it is. The program covers the cost of installation of EV infrastructure, which would include any site preparation necessary to ensure successful installation of the infrastructure that's covered in the submitted project.
How should vehicles and charging stations be listed if they need to go through the state competitive low bid purchasing process if there are no costs? They'll only be able to provide specs for the vehicles and chargers.
So
there is a state contract for electric vehicles charging stations, and that should give you a range of options and costs from the state contract. So I would take a look there. The last I saw, there were at least 2 vendors available.
And the specs and the costs that you submit with your application can be estimates. Actually, we expect that they will be estimates at that stage of the game.
Would diesel-powered utility line trucks be considered under this program? And I think the simple answer there is yes. Are there any constraints on what funds can be used as matching funds, state, federal?
The only constraint, and it's more practical, is other grants. If you're counting on another grant and it doesn't come through, then we have a problem. But you can use any other funds that are available to you as part of your match.
The next question is, I believe the presentation mentioned preferential criteria to non-attainment areas. Are these areas noted on your website? Is there a specific additional amount or percent for non-attainment areas?
If you look in the guidance document, and I think it may also be mentioned in the application form itself, the guidance document includes links to our website, the DEEP website, and there's an indication of where the environmental justice communities are and the impacted communities. There are 2 sets.
And there is no specific additional amount for projects located in a non-attainment area. That is just a preferred criteria while reviewing the applications. Next question, the first award for $7.5 million is only a portion of the funds. How many other award periods can we expect?
We're expecting to keep offering the program as long as we have funds remaining. So based on the applications we received and the number of applications that are successful in the first round and subsequent rounds, we will determine what funding we still have available, and we will continue to offer the program until the funding is exhausted.
Okay, is it okay for a municipality to set aside its anticipated local match now, or would that be considered initiating the project and render it ineligible?
What's set aside?
If the funds were put into a capital account that might be used for anything, but was then available, I would say you could then say it was coming from a capital account. If it's to buy a new truck, that's probably initiating a project ahead of the program.
Let's see here. Does the Connecticut State Contracting Portal meet the competitive bidding process for governmental entities?
Yes, absolutely.
Next question, readily available list of EJ communities and non-attainment areas. Yeah, I think that was addressed. There's some links in our
In the mitigation plan.
mitigation plan and on the information form and the guidance document, so you should be able to find that. Go into a little more detail on how we would indicate our intention to have a project funded through EPA and DERA. If we submit a project and indicate wanting to use VW settlement funds as match, would we know if we're approved for VW funding by the time an application is due to EPA? Or would we go on the assumption that we would be approved in developing an application using DERA?
Okay, the way Connecticut is running their DERA option is we're throwing that money into a separate DERA program. So you don't ask for DERA option funds in this VW program. You wait till October and apply through the DERA program.
Okay, next question, where can we get NOx emissions testing done? I'm not sure what that means, so maybe if you can send an email directly to us, we'd be able to help you out with that one, unless someone has some input there.
My guess is you're wanting to know how you can get the numbers. And there are several quantifiers out there. We like the diesel emission quantifier from EPA. Argonne has something called heavy-duty vehicle calculator that's offered through Clean Cities. It's available. And there's another one out there. And you can just put in the information about the age of your vehicle, how many miles it travels a year, how much fuel it uses, and it will spit out the projected NOx benefits. We will do a backup calculation for all of them. So if you can't come up with a fixed number for your application, we'll be checking it anyway.
We had a question about the scoring matrix that DEEP will use, whether or not that's available and how much weight do the different preferential criteria have.
We haven't established what the ranking system is. We know it will be based on the preferential criteria that's outlined in the mitigation plan. And once we do have that finalized, we'd be happy to share it with anyone who's interested. But at the moment, we have not yet finalized what the specifics of it is.
Should FET be calculated in the purchase price of the vehicle? I'm not sure I know what FET means, do you?
Tax.
Oh, is that what that is?
Excise tax?
Jim Burke and Hunt. Oh, do you know what federal excise tax? Okay.
I'm not sure.
We'll get back to you on that one.
We're going to have to look that up.
We're confused, so we'll get back to you on that.
Good question.
If vehicles are ordered but not received and the funds are not allocated, would these vehicles be considered for the grant? So someone ordered vehicles, but they haven't received them yet. Those
Ordering the vehicles is
It's considered starting the project.
initiating the project. Sorry.
Jim Burke did write back federal excise tax, 12% of the purchase price. So we'll look into that for you. What happened to the screen? Are the following eligible for 65% match? Oh, I just lost my workforce training costs to use new equipment or administrative costs for project management.
I believe it is eligible for the administrative portion of the grant. So you can submit the administrative expenditures associated with implementing your project, and we will evaluate that as part of the application for funding under that administrative funding portion of the program.
All right, I don't see any other questions here. If anyone has any questions, please submit them now. Otherwise, like I said, the email address, that account is viewed every day, so as we get questions in, we answer them as quickly as possible. Do you have anything else to address right now?
No, I think that's everything. Like Lou just said, if you have additional questions, anything come up following this webinar, or anything that you need additional clarification on that we've already talked about, just send us an email at deep.mobilesources@ct.gov, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks for participating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.